Hi, my name is Janelle Moore. Welcome to the Federal Project Management Series. Today we will be talking about capital planning, the Office of Management and Budget Circular number A11 guidance, as well as something called the Capital Programming Guide. My name is Janelle Moore. I will be your course instructor for this module on the Capital Planning, Office of Management and Budget Circular A11, and the Capital Programming Guide. I am the CEO of Zen Federal, which used to be a larger company, but in 2019, I completed an M&A and I sold off most of my company assets, as well as a nonprofit that I had developed and run, a wonderful organization called the Federal Civic Forum, which specialized in policy, portfolio management, as well as CIPIC, which is capital planning and investment control. I retired from that after 13 years of running it as an executive director. I also have about 25 years of experience in lifecycle solutions, management consulting, professional services, all to the federal government. The federal government contracting work has predominantly been my career. I have 3 masters, one in Chief Information Officer Studies from National Defense University. I also have a master's in information assurance, which is now more frequently called cybersecurity. And my master's of science in information management is from Syracuse University. My bachelor's is in philosophy and business administration from East Carolina University. Go Pirates! And I also have certifications, the CJIT, which is Certified in Governance Enterprise IT, Capital Planning Professional Instructor, and Governance Risk Compliance IT Certified. So that body of all those degrees and all those certifications exceed the highest standards of government requirements for certain types of acquisition, program management, and capital planning types of work. There are 2 certifications that are most frequently used for the government. One is the Federal Acquisition Certification, and the other is the Defense Authorization Workforce Improvement Act Certification. So that's the FAC or the DAWIA. They have 3 levels of those certifications, level 1, level 2, and level 3. The other very common certification is the Project Management Professional from the Project Management Institute, which is really only like a level 1 of the federal PM requirements that are within the scope of the FAC or the DAWIA certifications. The PMP, or the PMBOK rather, that project management body of knowledge, is actually a subset of the studies of my Master's of Science in Information Management and my NDU courses. So technically I have way more experience than a senior PMP or a FAC or DAWIA professional. So that means that I am robustly qualified to teach you this content, to distill it down into the appropriate meaty bits, and for you to have some really relevant takeaways for your continuing professional education in this area. In terms of business cases and budget proposals for the government, I've done congressional business, congressional budget justifications, CBJs. I've worked on the president's budget requests. I've worked on financial passbacks where the Office of Management and Budget, as part of the Executive Office of the President of the United States, sends those budget requests back for more management information or artifacts. I have not only developed those artifacts for clients, but I have taught different agencies and departments how to do those artifacts in facilitated sessions and workshops and trainings. I have done the tactical work in terms of delivery for clients. I have done the front end requirements and assisted with source selection. I have worked as an intermediary in public and private partnership discussions. So everything having to do with capital planning and governance and the business cases and how that flows up through the executive and legislative branches and back down through the C-suite of the IT shops, the CXOs, the CFOs, the CIOs, and into those program level and project level teams. I've done it in both ways, both directions. So I can talk to it and I can also do it. And that makes me more popular as an instructor of this content, because it's one thing to talk the talk, but it's another thing to actually get into the agencies and to the programs and the directorates and show folks how to do this work and to do it right. So hopefully that information will be useful and will give you context for making sure that you have someone telling you how to do this that knows how to do it themselves. So I want to set forth some learning objectives to make sure that you understand what your takeaways will be for this module. So first, I'm going to introduce you to the OMB Circular A11, and I'm going to specifically dive into the areas that have some IT investment applicability. We're going to talk to capital assets in general, and we're going to talk to the IT components with specificity. The reason that I am choosing to approach it this way is that there is a multi-trillion-dollar infusion of money coming through taxpayers and through legislation. It looks like it's going to be moved from an attempted appropriation called the American Jobs Plan, which was designed to be the precursor of the American Jobs Act that Biden and Harris have been proposing for calendar year 2021, which is fiscal or budget year 2023. We have heard through the news and the media that Chuck Schumer, on behalf of Congress, has let the president know that this can be moved into a president's budget request instead of an appropriation. And so we know that come fall of 2021, the initial infusions of cash into the United States economy will commence as soon as that budget is approved through the president and Congress and gets ratified. And what that's going to mean is that this infusion of cash for investments in infrastructure will become something called capital assets. And capital assets are managed and funded through budget proposals that include something called business cases or business case justifications. And whether it's a road or a bridge or an information management system that communicates processes and programs like the project management offices that will run the oversight of these investments, whether you're looking at the IT piece or the asset itself, it's still managed within the threshold of any capital asset. And the A11 is that guidance based on the laws that have been established over many years of how you have to run that infrastructure investment or the series of infrastructure investments. And there's a very specific part of the OMB Circular A11 called the Capital Programming Guide. And I'm going to talk about where to find that capital programming guide and its three phases, the planning and budgeting phase, the acquisition phase, and the management and use phase. And I won't go into too much detail, but I'll give you the high-level overview and give you an orientation of what's going to be important to know, because this budget is going to be a game changer with the United States economy, and it's going to require a lot of people who haven't had any background in capital planning and governance whatsoever to have to understand this process so that they and you can have more of a deep understanding and potentially a competitive advantage for getting your budget proposals or the business that you want to do with the government that would be supported by this giant infusion of taxpayer debt, basically. You need to understand how it works. And this circular and what I'm going to teach you is very relevant in how to do that successfully. And I will cover even what the appendices cover in some detail. So your learning objectives are really to get an orientation of why this is important. And I'm going to use this $1.5 to $2 trillion American jobs investment in infrastructure as part of the U.S. budget to talk to the different sections and what it means. So for the purpose of this learning exercise in this module, I'm going to use the December 2020 version of OMB's Circular A11, which is named appropriately Preparation, Submission, and Execution of the Budget. The A11 and the companion capital programming guide can usually be found online at whitehouse.gov. If you type in whitehouse.com, you'll get a completely different website that has nothing to do with this. Just saying. And within the A11, what I'm going to drill into is a section called Section 55. And that specifically addresses capital assets that have IT components. And so some of you may say, well, wait a minute. If this is infrastructure investment that covers like roads and bridges and lead pipes and veteran housing, what does that have to do with IT? It's got a lot to do with IT, and we'll get into that in more detail. But I think that I've pulled out the best parts that are going to help give you sort of that crash course and that overview. And we're going to talk about major investments or major acquisitions and what defines those. And then I'm going to break it down a little bit more into the standard investments that have delineations of IT categories, cost pools and cost towers, which some of you with an IT background and the last few years of guidance and reporting to OMB, if you have that experience in the last 3 to 4 years, you'll recognize something called Technology Business Management, or TBM. And so I'll get into where that sort of fits into the bigger picture of this. So the purposes of going through this, I mentioned that I will be covering the OMB Circular A11, specifically the December 2020 version, which was the most recent version at the time of this recording, and the most recent version of the Capital Programming Guide that I'm referring to is version 3.1, which was adjacent or accompanied that December 2020 A11. So if you're seeing this at some future time, whitehouse.gov will have whatever the most recent version is. But as far as the time of this recording, the 12/2020 and V3.1 are the versions that I'm teaching from. So I would skip ahead now to specifically section 55 of the A11, which has to do with IT investments. And this is where I mentioned earlier, well, Janelle, if this is an infrastructure investment in roads and bridges or highways and railways and the energy grid, well, what does that have to do with IT? Like, what does that have to do with computers? And my answer is everything. And here's why. If you go back to the early 90s during the Clinton administration, that was the last real infusion of taxpayer funds into infrastructure investments, unless you count 2 failed border wall attempts by 2 prior Republican administrations, one of the Bush administrations and the last administration run by 45. And neither of those border wall investments ever was built to completion. There was work done on them, but when you look at an overarching infrastructure investment, the last comprehensive one where any major investment was made in something other than a wall was Bill Clinton in the early 90s. And at that time and into the early and mid 2000s, you started to see legislation emerge from bipartisan governments, a variety of them, that really sort of shored up how to manage capital assets. And so capital asset management, capital programming, the planning, programming, budgeting, and execution of these investments has been through like a 20 to 25 year maturation from a legislative perspective and from a management perspective internal to the government. And I really sort of grew up in my career on this stuff. I didn't realize what I was getting into at the time, but coming now full circle to the Biden-Harris administration, the difference between the early 90s to mid 2000s where this started and where it's come full circle back to is that the capital asset guidance really applies to all capital assets. But the last 2 to 3 administrations really only put their resources on transparency and management of the IT pieces of this investment approach and the capital asset management approach. So what that kind of means in English is The only people that really know how to do this in the government well, that have trained and gotten the requisite continuing professional education, and like myself, who are really strong in it, there's not a lot of us left, because a lot of my counterparts were much older than I was. They were much more senior to me as I got into this line of work. And a lot of them are retired and hanging out on golf courses and fishing and RVing and hanging out with their grandkids. They don't do this anymore. And there's not a lot of people that have come behind me as the disciplines were more automated over in the IT shops and the CIO offices. So now there's going to be this huge infusion of cash into the United States economy through the federal government. It's going to have to be subjected to the management and oversight for the definitions of capital assets. But where are the people that know how to do this? In the IT shops, in the offices of the CIO. And there's really only two places to find the remaining junior, mid-level, and senior analysts that know how to do this work, of which I'm one of the very senior people left that knows how to do this. Hence why I'm recording this content before the budget comes out and making it virtually accessible on a variety of platforms, because everyone's going to be subjected to this governance, and not a lot of people know how much is involved in it. So to understand how to tap into that infusion of money, how it's going to be run, what's going to be involved, and how to get your piece of it for your business or for your agency or department, you're going to understand how this works. So Section 55 for IT investments really is Section 55 for all investments, including those with an IT component. But the capital asset management process is not exclusive to IT. I'm going to teach it for IT and non-IT in the same module. So everyone, whether you're IT or not, needs to understand the value of Section 55, the overview, what has to be reported in investments that include IT, what specific guidance applies, and when is the information required. Because the Biden-Harris administration is going to require reciprocity of communication, communication of goals, communication of achievement of those goals in exchange for increments of federal funding. And that's going to be a really important cornerstone, because how is that information going to be transmitted? Even if it's a bridge or a lead pipe initiative or a veterans homelessness initiative, it's going to be transmitted through information management systems that have to have the appropriate interfaces and the appropriate platforms that connect appropriately on the federal enterprise architecture. So you have to understand these pieces and why they're important. We're going to cover how agencies have to align all of these investments, including the IT components, with their strategic plans. We're going to talk about which departments and agencies that are going to receive this money and have to push this out to the state, local, and tribal governments, and to the public-private partnerships and small businesses through acquisitions, where this is going to fit in. So which requirements apply. It covers what everyone needs to know about the budget and management requirements for reporting and for managing and providing the appropriate oversight for this infusion of budget funding. And then we're going to talk again about what constitutes a major business case versus a standard business case and the IT piece of that. So it's important that whether you consider yourself IT or not, if you're looking at this budget and you're looking at what this is going to do in terms of moving the money through the budget process, through the agencies and departments out into the United States economy for infrastructure investments, you have to understand how this works. So if you're looking to get into this line of work, as I've mentioned a number of times, there's way more demand for professionals like myself than there is supply. There aren't a lot of us left in the senior ranks that haven't already retired. And there are only a few or junior or mid-level positions for the jobs that are out there. So there are a lot of vacancies in these areas because people don't have the right qualifications. They haven't had the right access to training until now. So if you need me to counsel or mentor you, if you want me to look at your resume or talk to you about how to get into this line of work, There is a button on my website at zenfederal.com where you can book an hour or a couple of hours of my time to help you get more prepared to apply for this work, or to help you sort of level up. I'm working with the fit sourcing team, and you can contact them at recruiting at fitsourcing.org. Your cover letter, your resume, any clearance information you have about clearances that you have previously held or currently held, or what you think that you might be able to go through the process and obtain. Your continuing professional education, any information about degrees or transcripts that you have, salary details, these kinds of things. The fit sourcing team uses networks to make placements, and companies hire for recruitment and referral. This team, they're not on the career builders and the monsters looking at a million resumes. They're networking person to person, peer to peer, company to company to find skilled talent, or to help prime and coach and mentor talent to get into the HR offices and the recruiters that are tasked with doing this. Some other ways you can stay current are to follow me on LinkedIn. I put out jobs, internships, opportunities, Feducation, links to additional training as I come across it. I don't charge for that. I put it out, and it's sort of spray and pray. If you follow me and you're in the right place at the right time, I'll share that information freely. And make sure that for all of my training, you keep those certificates. You'll need them for your recruitment. You'll need them for your jobs. You'll need them for your professional development plans. You'll need them for your certifications. So I have only chosen platforms that will give you these certificates of completion, because the continuing professional education component of these jobs, and making sure that you're qualified if a company is putting you forward to the government as key personnel, this is a very critical piece of this that we're making available to you. Thank you so much for taking the time to take one of our training modules. The Zen Federal team and I want to thank you for taking our courses, and for making it possible by buying these courses and taking them. We are reinvesting the funds that are taken from this training to create more modules and more Feducation. I encourage you to reach out to me. If you like what you have seen, please give us a favorable review. Please share. Please recommend this to others. If there's something you'd like to see more of, or something that I or we could do better, please use the contact information to reach out to me. I welcome constructive criticism. It's how I personally approve and how I apply myself. We have a lot more modules that are available, and we have the availability to also provide the management consulting and professional advisory services one-on-one, or to companies or to agencies. And we can also do in-person training, instructor-led training, classroom-based training. We have other services, and I look forward to hearing from you and trying to find a way that we can work together in the future. Thank you for your time.